is. Yes, I'm wearing a shirt. I'm about to go on date night. But before that, we have finished the MSQ. It is complete. It is done. And I suppose here I should express my thoughts, but there's a lot. There's a lot. Let's go through what happened and talk about the individual bits, and then we'll see where my brain takes me. I suppose that's where we'll go. We were already in the Golden City of memories of these long-lost members of a society that should have died a long time ago, and they were keeping them alive through the power of draining the life of other people. And as we talked about in the previous video, the ratios didn't add up from day one, and our girl Sphene knows that, and so she's on a mission. She's going to delete all her morality codes and all that kind of stuff. She's going to erase all that, all the stuff that's holding her back from doing what Zeraljar could, so she can unleash upon many reflections and suck the life out of them to keep her people alive. That's the primary mission. That's Robo mission number 1. Must keep her people going and keep them happy and pure. Alright, so we understand that. So the way the zone played out was actually really nice, is they divided it very distinctly between 4 areas, and each area had a main reason to go there, so you could resolve an issue with some character that you probably met through the story or you've been waiting to see. So this was nice, because by the second one you're like, oh, I wonder who's coming up next, because you're racking your brain like who could come up next. In particular, I very much enjoyed, if not my favorite one actually, yeah, it was, yeah, by far my favorite actually was the visit to Yesterland, I think it was called, which is where they relived childhood. Where they were any adults with childlike personalities or childlike tendencies, and children themselves, because obviously children do die, unfortunately. And visiting there, they totally recreated the Alexandria experience from FF9, which was great, because I got the reverse that I used to have. When I first played 14, I hadn't played the single-player games. Now I've played them all, and now I was like, oh, this is cool. And of course, this one was themed around Otis, the original Otis. When they originally decided to, he volunteered himself for this experiment of storing memories and stuff. They put that memory of that Otis then up into the cloud, and then another Otis went on to become Robo Otis, who we meet out in the real world. And so we meet Otis, and he's a child's fan favorite. He's the Knight of Alexandria. He protects the children. He fights, and still has. He's got this grandiose, braviosy style that the children love. He is there to protect them, but he still indicates early on that he harbors so much regret that he could not protect his queen, because that's why he volunteered. The queen does die. And he's not Steiner exactly. I will say this, right? They didn't... obviously, this character is based on Steiner from FF9. If you've never played FF9, there's a character called Steiner that Otis is kind of based on. You should play FF9. Steiner's fantastic. But they didn't include the iconic helmet. I was like, okay. And then they changed his personality more so here than what we could sort of infer from the Robo version. I was like, oh, okay. They kind of moved away a little bit more than maybe I'd like. They're not going for one. I'm not stupid. But I was like, he's less Steiner for me now. But he's still a wonderful character. He's still an absolutely wonderful character. And he's off rehearsing because they're going to do the play, which is a big part of the Final Fantasy IX, is the play that you take part in earlier in the game. And FF in general, the single player games are known for their play reenactments. Happens in many games. And you get to join in and have fun. But then the darkness sets in during the play, the PTSD of what happened with Sphene when she died back in the day. It was played by Alala, which I thought was great. As she dies and he freezes up, and Wuk Lamat attempts to salvage the situation, but she's not a host, she's not a presenter, she's not quite sure how to grab that mic. I was like, I wonder what I would do here. As somebody who's had to do this, not because somebody's like frozen up, and people have frozen up, but not because of PTSD, but when people freeze up and you're like, okay, I got this, don't worry, I'll carry us through to the end. I've had to do that many, many, many times. I was like, oh man, I kind of wish I was there. It's like, can I jump in and deal with it? Because Wuk Lamat's like, and then we lived in happiness and things like that, and trying to resolve it. It was cool. It was a wonderful moment, and then the real darkness sits in. But the main theme here is Otis. It's revealed that, you know, these are living people, and that they knew Otis after this, and he resolves this before you switch him off. I'm getting a little emotional about this because it was great. It was done so well. Is that you explain to him that he fought on. he did fight on. He did what he could. And there's a king now. And you protected the king. Like, you did your duty for hundreds of years after what you're aware of. Because you were, you were separated a long time ago. And that resolves him. That makes him whole. Because he's been living in this endless world, knowing that he failed his queen in his eyes. Despite there was nothing he could do about it. But, like, he's been dealing with this trauma, which is clearly still seriously affecting him, despite his jovial, over-the-top personality, for a really long time. And you give him peace. And I was like, I love this. This is great. The whole thing is wonderful. And he's fine with being switched off. He's fine with it, right? Most people are. And so off you go and you switch him off and you murder all the children again. They're dead again. You have to... There's a lot here in this whole zone that you really have to think about a lot to realize just how awful this place is in terms of what you're seeing, despite the glitz and glamour of what you're seeing. And someone pointed out something really nice, is that it is sold to you that your recreation in the Endless is based on probably when you were happiest in your life or happiest with yourself. And then it's pointed out, it's like, these children that you're seeing, probably a lot of them aren't children. They're adults, but they were never happier in their entire lives, and except when they were children. And I was like, oh, that's so dark. That's so unbelievably dark. By the way, that's that zone. So then we moved on to the next zone, which was the volcano zone. Good, not good enough. For those of you who know what's coming. This is the meeting and the resolution to Krile's pathway, or Maya, as we can call her. Krile's pathway coming into Dawntrail. There was an implication, I think a lot of us read into, that given the links to Galuf and the going to here, is that we were going to have a Krile-centric scenario. And some people would have thought that the storyline was probably going to be more Krile and Erenville-centric. But it's not. And there's mentions throughout, like we see some flashbacks of Galuf. We call him Galuf from the old single-player game, so forgive me if you're upset about naming. It's my instincts. And we meet her parents. They're at a gladiatorial arena watching the fights, which is terrible. It's one of the worst fights I've ever seen. It's two scholar Lalas just broiling each other. It's awful. But they're there. And I'm like, oh my god, we're going to meet her parents. And there was like almost flashbacks to Oriange meeting Moonbreeder's parents. But we haven't had the setup yet. We don't know her parents. We got a lot of questions. Why did they leave her behind? What happened? How is she going to react to this? They decided to play it as just being super awkward. That they're sat like at tables and things, and they're just not speaking to each other. They're not asking questions. They're not trying to do anything. They're just sort of staring at each other. And this goes on for quite some time. And the way the gameplay revolves around here is trying to break the ice, literal icebreakers. So the suggestion is, we'll go and get them something to eat. And then there's a weird gameplay loop, because it's very obvious what you're going to get at the start. It's like, we want something cold, and you've walked past like 4 ice cream stands. It's like, okay, we're going to go get them some ice cream. But you've got to like ask the citizens, like, what's nice and cold around here? And they're like, ice cream. Duh. So you have this weird gameplay loop where you come back and you give them ice creams, and they just sit there with their ice creams. And then there's another gameplay sequence for some reason, and we're starving for, like, conversation and answers and story here. And they're like, okay, Graha's got a new idea. He's going to go get himself an ice cream, and he's going to stuff it into his face, so it's silly and funny, and that'll break the ice. And it does, for the story reasons. It's just like, god damn it, will you get on with it? And they kind of skip over a lot of stuff. In fact, they don't have conversations that you'd expect them to have until, like, much later in this sequence, because what follows then is a museum tour and a quiz on the lore of what happened. But we do find out some cool things. We find out that long ago, the Lalas, or the Malali, I think they're called originally, ties back into the source. They're from the source, and they evacuated the source and ended up in Alexandria, and then they sent Krile back to the source. But they're originally from the source. And they were ridiculously good scientists, to the point that they had the technology for interdimensional fusion long ago, like hundreds of years ago, until I think it's like the 5th Umbral Calamity was wiping them out, because the oceans were freezing and things, and that's when they used the port key, which is what I'm going to call it from Harry Potter, in order to evacuate off to Alexandria. But most of them were dead. But the scientists that arrived there boosted their technology massively, To the point where they were building, you know, port keys and things like that, which is what the door in the caverns in the Senno is. And that's all cool lore, you know, we got the lore of what's going on, but it's not what the current plot is. And as we know, or hopefully we know, there's a big difference between lore and plot. The lore of the world and what's currently happening right now. And I'm desperate for what's happening right now. But it's kind of skipped over and done in this awkward way. I was like, ah. And then it's resolved in kind of like one conversation at the end where we find out that they understood what was happening with the souls and things, and they weren't happy about it. They understood preservation of the societies that they were going to. They're the founders of preservation, and they knew that the plan was to go and start pillaging other reflections for life, and they weren't down with it, so they got Krile out of there. They commandeered the doorway. They got Krile out of there. They left them with Galuf, and then they went back to continue the good fight of preservation there. They just wanted to get their daughter out. And I was like, that's lovely. And then it's resolved, like, very quickly. And I was like, it's fine, but I am still disappointed, is how I was feeling about it. It's fine, but I'm disappointed. I hoped for more for Krile. I hoped for a much more overall Krile-centric scenario. But it was fine. It was fine. It just was... For a character who've been known for so long, I wanted a deeper payoff to work with these characters. And then they're switched off, so that's done. It's just done and dusted. Again, feels a little rushed compared to what I craved, right? It's like I was really looking forward to this amazing dinner when we started Dawntrail, and then I kind of got the sampler and it was done. I was like, oh, okay, and that's it. It's done. Kitchen's closed. I'm like, right, well, fair enough. And then we're off to the final zone, which is Erenville's final payoff, who's not been too centric to the story. Had a lot more screen time and stuff going on than Krile, sure, but not like a focused journey for Erenville, in my opinion anyway. And this is the resolution with his mother. He's obviously very, very unhappy that he's not seen his mother in so long, and now he's got his mother back, because you would feel that way. It's like, I have my mother back. And now he's got to say goodbye to her again, and she wants it, and he's like, you're just making these decisions, and you're not caring about how it affects other people, including me. And the way they play it out is because they're both, like, scientist nerds, you know, teachers and things, is they're talking about plants and things, but which meant, again, made the gameplay very boring. It was like, okay, let's explore the plants. I'm like, all right. And now let's go to the nature museum. Oh my god. This isn't what I want. But in many ways, I was okay with this, because the purpose of this is actually to be a blank slate. I see what they're going for here. It's actually kind of... It's opening the way this is written is to allow you to project onto these characters how you would feel in this scenario, especially for anybody who's lost a parent. And it became very apparent, like, midway towards the end of this, is I was very much getting a little upset, not because of what was happening in the game, but because the game was making me relive what had happened with my father. My father died a while ago. I didn't get to say goodbye. He was in a coma by the time I got to him. And all these feelings came back, and I was like, okay, I get what you're doing here, is you've basically made them like Bella Swan in Twilight, right? She has no personality, nothing's really going on, because they want the audience to project themselves onto that character. They make them, you know, this is a very normal thing, is like, you make that character you. And it's like, that's what they're going for here. And in fact, the whole thing of this zone is saying goodbye to loved ones, or if you had the chance to say goodbye to loved ones, if you have the chance to resolve things. So we have that with Otis, and we have that with Krile's parents, and we have that here. Is like, if you get that, if you had that second chance with people who have left us, what would you do? And that's what leads to also the frustration, is that these characters aren't doing that. But then again, everybody would probably do something different. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm okay with this. This is fine. For Erenville's sake, for the character's sake, I probably would have liked more, but I got a good feeling from it, or not a good feeling, but emotional response from it. And then that's done. We switch her off, and now it's time to deal with Sphene, right? Obviously, there's going to be a final fight. We got an extra dungeon here. I was surprised by that we got another dungeon. The dungeon was the best one so far, dealing with Sphene's memories. The recreation of Alexandria from FF9 for the opening sequence of the dungeon was phenomenally good. It was beautiful. It was like real care and attention. I want to go back in there. I've only done it once. I want to go back in and see if they put some Easter eggs in the background and stuff. Like, is there a Moogle in the clock tower? Are we going to see, like, somebody trying to fix a bucket somewhere? Something like that, because obviously during the dungeon we're playing it, but I kind of want to go in with duty support and just sort of stare and look into the distance and see if they did put some Easter eggs in there from the game, because the recreation is fantastic. The fights were really good. They're fights that I think you do want, for most people, you probably want at least a second look at to get them perfect. I died on a couple of them, which is fine. I have no issue with that in the first visit to a dungeon, to see mechanics for the first time, especially if they're, you have to be a little observant with some of them, so no big deal. And had fun in this dungeon, and I liked the conclusion. I liked that we got to experience Otis witnessing Sphne's death, and then her ultimate rebirth of what she's coming out to be. So the whole dungeon, again, good. Really, really good. And then for the final trial, the final boss, great. Absolutely love this. Can't wait to see this on EX. This is certainly a tougher fight than the other two. In order to pick up everything. A lot of overlapping mechanics, lots of things going on. I particularly loved the use of the ground being like a old school 80s grid, black on green grid system that modifies to show like sound waves and things like that, and different wave patterns in order to indicate where the mechanics were. I was like, this is great. This is really good. Died loads of times here. Like absolutely got mullered. But like, this is a fight that like is going to be super fun and super amazing. And then the final conclusion. They once again kind of played a sympathy angle here, just like they'd done with Zeral Jar, who from here on out will be known as Jar Rule. I don't feel any real sympathy for Sphene as the AI. I don't feel the sympathy that I feel like they're going for with either of these characters. The kid is sympathetic. Bakulja is sympathetic, the child. But for the actual antagonists and what they've done, no. I understand, obviously I understand that she's compelled to do these things, and it's not her fault, but certainly compared to, like, the intricacies of an Emmett Selk or whatever, it's like, I don't really feel that level of sympathy. I don't empathize with this position. And mainly because, from a logical perspective, it's a doomed plan from day one. Like, just on paper, this whole plan just doesn't work. There's just not enough life to continuously sustain a never-ending population. Doesn't work. And it's pointed out much earlier in the Golden City. I think it's Alizé or Krile who says that to Sphene. It's like, this never is going to work. It's just a perpetually doomed plan. And from my brain, I'm like, yeah, like, this is just stupid. I get you're compelled to do it. I understand that. But you're also... It's pointless. There's no victory to be had here. Eventually, you will scrape everything of all life, and you'll still lose. There's no way this works. It's just forever doomed. And we finish off the fight, and that's the end of Dawntrail, as we then get a very minor hint. Not really, and this kind of falls back into... We get the reveal that the Arcadian is back open, and there's evil mustached Lala behind the whole thing, and I'm like, okay, of course the Lala is the poison that's dealing with it. And the Arcadian... But that's the raid. I know the Arcadian is the raid. And so I'm started going like, they're really not leaving us much, at least until I do the raid, of what comes next. Which then ties back into what we've talked about, and I do believe that Yoshi P was saying the truth, is like, we're going to see what you like and dislike, and we've got many paths we can go on, but we're not going to commit to a path right now because we don't know where it's going to go. Which then brings us to our overall thoughts on Dawntrail. I'm going to keep it brief here because there's going to be a main channel video where I can be much more specific and dig into it, which will be coming in a couple of weeks. People like to give an overall grading. I hate that. I really do. Because too much of the internet and gaming culture and the real world, not just gaming culture, is black and white. It's either S tier or it's dog. That's it. There's no in between. And that is not what this MSQ is. It's a ton of different things. Some of them are really good. Some of them are really bad. Some of the mistakes are baffling in the choices they made, and other ones are just kind of misfires, and not everything can be amazing, and then sometimes it reaches really great heights. Hence, mixed. Divisive. And it should be, because there is divisive elements here. It's not... Dawntrail is not one cohesive story. It isn't. we can do it very general. I still think this is general. Break down the middle. Pre-Vanguard, post-Vanguard. Pre-Vanguard is the story of this young to-be leader journeying to discover herself, discover her people, and become the leader. Boom. Then there's the story post-Vanguard of this invasion with a whole new culture, with a bunch of new characters, utilizing characters from the past, and how they react, and how they deal with things. So we could draw a hard line there, right? I want to make a few points in this video before I expand on them in the main video. One, let's talk about Wuk Lamat. Am I in love with Wuk Lamat? No. No, I'm not. However, that doesn't mean I hate Wuk Lamat. I don't hate Wuk Lamat. And I'm very curious if in a couple of years, 4 years' time, I will have the same reaction to Wuk Lamat as I had with the twins, which is I hated them, or I hated Alfie for a very long time, and Thancred. And then later on, I was like, I'll burn everybody alive if they touch the twins, right? That character development happened for me. I wonder if that'll happen. I do believe, wholeheartedly, this character was doomed before she ever appeared on screen. Now, some people will be like, I know there's a lot of hate for Wuk Lamat, but hear me out for a second. If you write a story with a new character and you're all in a world with very established characters that people love and adore, and you decide to give that character 97, 98% of the screen time in a game known for its story, and in order to do that, you constantly have to drive away in some form or another characters that people really love all the time. They are going to build resentment to that character whether they like them or not. I don't give a goddamn if it's Wuk Lamat or Gosetsu, which people universally love. If there was an expansion that is just 99% Gosetsu, and Gosetsu keeps sending all the scions away, when you know, especially if you know these characters very well, they would be very valuable and interesting during this period of time, even if it was just sidelines or just opinions throwing in, you will build resentment towards that character, regardless of how well they're written and how well they're done. And if that then is a character that you don't particularly like, it gets even worse. So I truly believe one of the biggest misfires of Dawntrail is just not letting Wuk Lamat breathe. I cannot miss you if you never go away. Just giving some time away. Like, we didn't spend all of Stormblood with Hien. We went and did things. We went and dealt with other issues. Hien comes in later on in the story. And, you know, we didn't do that. And that was for the best. We dealt with things like Fordola first and all these kinds of elements, who then came back later on. It's like, oh, yeah, you know, that kind of element. And throughout Stormblood, they just didn't have some of the scions there. Like Y'shtola was AFK for the whole thing. In this one, that's not the case. They keep bringing the scions back and then just sending them immediately away. And it's frustrating and it's annoying because even if you like Wuk Lamat, you probably still want to spend time with these people. And then there's a lot of community division here. It's like, yeah, but the scions don't exist anymore. I was like, look, I feel a lot in Dawntrail right now, and I'm still processing the whole thing, so it's like 45 hours of content with details in it, right? That they try to have their cake and eat it too. On the one hand, you have the end of Endwalker, where the scions are broken up, and they're not going to gather anymore, because people get terrified when these guys are hanging around. We're not going to do that. First of all, we're in a new continent, so them gathering up, it doesn't matter anymore. And two, they're all there. And they keep showing up together. So that doesn't apply either. And they keep coming back like member berries to just walk away again. And like it or not, in any cogent situation that has been carefully thought out, when we're dealing with a lot of the things we deal with in Dawntrail, from mystical etheric doors that time travel and stuff, you would immediately be on the phone to these people if they weren't there. And the worst part is they are there and they're constantly being pushed away. Having Wild Westinian is possibly the most hilarious arc in Dawntrail. It really is ridiculous. Because I said in our pre-Dawntrail predictions, it's like, I hope Estinian gets a lot of character arcs. I was kind of tired of him becoming the goof, the clown, the comic relief. And here he's even more. He shows up like 3 times just randomly. It's worse than his bizarre arrival in Stormblood where he just drops out of the sky, destroys a cannon, and then just vanishes again. And that's why we have the display in the background. You can see it here where he's Batman. He's Batman with Gaius because he just shows up and disappears like the bat signal's done. And those kind of things will... all that wrapped up is like, oh... I put it this way. Does it make more sense to anybody who's played this game that somebody like Estinian, who has defended a whole city and helped topple religions and has fought dragons and has ridden into battle on the back of a dragon and has befriended them and is possibly one of the most skilled fighters on the planet, is best served looking after a town with a population of 200 in the middle of nowhere, or being out there in the big battle in the front lines with armies of soldiers and stuff like that? It makes no sense. It just doesn't add up. And the same can be said for Thancred and everybody else. These people who have literally fought to the brink of the edge of the galaxy and solved universal issues should not be defending this area. That's what the troops should be doing. They should be in the front lines. And they recognize that by just randomly having them reappear again. If there's a trial coming up, it's like, oh, and they're here now. That stuff really frustrated me, and that's why I come back to what I was saying, is like, Wuk Lamat is destined to be doomed due to the way this is paced and the focus and attention on her. And then you're like, well, why did they do that? And I think they did that because Dawntrail tries to achieve far too much. Far too much. They needed a storyline wrapped up in 40 hours that had 4 or 5 different focuses, instead of, say, Endwalker, which had 2. The resolution of Zodiac and Hydaelyn, which was done very quickly, and that's fine. Why? Because that story has been building since A Realm Reborn. It's not rushed. It feels quick in the expansion in terms of the time you arrive at that conclusion, but there is nobody in the world who believes that the story of the Ascians and Hydaelyn and everything is rushed, because it's literally spanned many expansions, so it was fine. And then we had the entire expansion with a pure focus on Meteion. One singular focus, and only a couple of characters that needed developing. And as Chris rightly pointed out, a lot of them didn't need developing because we already knew Emet-Selch. Like, who's the new characters? Meteion, Hythlodaeus. It's about it in terms of main Endwalker-focused characters. Everyone else we kind of know, and we just wanted more of them. We wanted to know more of them, but we know who they are. We know what they become. We know Hermes. We know what he's about. So they very few additional character development needed. In Dawntrail, it's Wuk Lamat, it's all the Dawn Servants, it's Daddy, it's the cultures of Taral itself. They all needed to be explained, explored, and justified. And then we have Alexandria, we have Everkeep, we have Sphene, we have Otis, we have endless characters, we have the whole Resistance, we have Kryle's parents, we've got Erenville's mother, we've got Erenville's childhood friend, I forget her name now. We've got whole towns that need to... You see what I'm saying? There's the constant focuses instead of a nice clear path, and it tries to achieve far too much. And despite the length of it, sometimes it feels rushed, sometimes it feels slow, and the current divisive mixed opinions on it are completely justified. I know people want me to give it an overall grade, but I can't, because that wouldn't make any sense. Which bit are you talking about? I can say, in general, for those who want that, the first half of the MSQ, I didn't particularly enjoy too much. The second half, I loved. I very much enjoyed it. It still has faults, for sure, but I very much enjoyed it. Everything past Vanguard, I was into. It felt like FF14 again. It felt more mature. But I would say, and I wonder, at least for now, I wonder if Dawntrail was aimed at a younger audience. Certainly with the ridiculous poppy song that they keep playing, which feels out of place in most times. I actually didn't mind it during the credits, because like the montage and Erenville talking kind of took a lot of the focus away from it. But it's not a song that I'd ever listen to again. It reminded me very much of the end of Stormblood with the sing-song. And it feels like High School Musical. I wonder if, like, we kind of got away... with Shadowbringers and Endwalker, we kind of ended up targeting probably adults more than we maybe should. And we should probably try and bring it down to a younger audience as well. Make it more digestible for those, for, you know, your younger teens, your tweens. Because we can't start... We have to be careful, and a lot of games do this. We can't be catering to, like, 30-year-olds. right? You know, at some point they're going to stop playing because life gets in the way. Then we need to aim at a younger audience, and this does feel aimed at a younger audience. But that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to leave it there purely because there's a lot more to talk about and to think about. More importantly for myself. So watch out for the main channel video. We are now heading, of course, into the Arcadian. So tomorrow, I'll let you know how that goes. Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.